Hello and welcome to Tiny Table Talks, the podcast about board games, PC games and all the grey matter in between. If you're new here, then welcome, and please consider hitting that subscribe button so that you never miss a future episode being released. And if you enjoy this episode, don't forget to click that like button. If you want to join our fun games community, then do follow us on social media at Tiny Table Pop. Right then, let's start the show. In a galaxy far, far away, a board game was made to make all other board games obsolete. It traveled many light years across the galaxy, looking for a human host to infect with its theme, who could be a spokesperson for this game for years to come, to love and to cherish this game until cardboard degradation does them part. A charismatic human, tall and broad, with a handsome smile and golden hair. Unfortunately, their navigation was a bit off, and they ended up with Simon. Still, here we all are, ready and waiting for the start of the Tiny Table Talks Twilight Imperium special. We hope you enjoy the show. For anyone that might be new to the podcast, at the start of every week, we have a competition where one person asks a question of the other three, who must then pick a board game to champion in response to. We all get a chance then to argue our case, and the winning person is selected and gains a point. Simon is judging it this week, so Simon, do you want to let us know what we're trying to find a game to champion for?
In the spirit of it being Twilight Imperium special this week, the topic that I've selected is the game that you're most likely to lose a friend over. And shall we start with Rob, because I'm sure he hasn't prepared anything.
Yeah. You know what? You guys are joking about it. Work are joking about. Actually, work are being quite serious. I'm in a lot of trouble. The game that I've chosen, which I'm most likely to lose friends over, is diplomacy.
I've chosen that game too, and that is because it is the right answer.
Do you know, Claire, this is actually one of the few times I actually 100% agree with you. Okay, so first of all, this evidences the excellent preparation that goes into making these podcasts. And I think also presents an interesting opportunity to team up against Sam.
Oh, very much in the spirit of the diplomatic game.
Well, absolutely fantastic. I think, if anything else, we are actually doing a pretty good job of explaining how diplomacy works just purely through this mistake.
This fine.
If you win, are you guys going to split the point?
No.
Are you going to take the whole point?
Well, I think I get to make that decision as the independent adjudicator, and I agree with Sam. I'm going to sustain that objection. It will be a half a point each for poor preparation.
Half a point.
Ooh.
Okay. All right, no, I'll take half a point. At the moment, I believe I'm on nothing, so I will take half a point.
I'll accept that too.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, in which case, Claire, why don't we both explain it and then give our reasons for choosing it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I chose this game. It's actually one of the few strategy games. Actually, I say one of the few. There's lots out there, but we haven't actually played this as a group, which is unusual. I think, seeing as it is an absolute classic. I'm a little bit disappointed we haven't played it, but I do think the only reason why we are still friends is possibly because we haven't played it. It is just designed to make you irritated with other people.
Shall I explain how it works?
Yeah, go on.
Yes, please.
So, you can be one of 7 nations in and around the region of Europe. It starts at the very beginning of the 1900s, which is a time where you may recall there's quite a lot of diplomatic tensions leading up to the First World War. So, the aim of the game is to move your dudes on the map to control strategic points on the map. Once someone has 18 of these strategic points, they win. The way that you take one of these areas is that the province that you want to take, you've got to have more provinces supporting the attack than that are supporting the defence. In order to maximise the number of provinces that are acting as you want, you have to get other players to support you. And this is a huge, huge part of the game. Every round allocates time to the mingling so that deals can be struck. There aren't dice or any kind of element of chance in the game, so that everything that happens has to be the result of decisions that players have made, which is part of the reason that you can play the blame game so well. You can't blame it on the dice. It is the fault of your friends when it goes badly for you. Although this game can be played around a table, it can also be done virtually, which is where the diplomatic element, I think, gets really, really intense, because there's a lot more time allocated to it, and people's friendships start to intermingle with the diplomacy of the game. The real issue is that the people that you think are your allies are liable to deceive you for their own gain and general convenience. Is there anything else you want to add, Rob, before we start to go into why this leads to such strife and such lost friendships?
No, I think that's a very good description. Particularly, I suppose, what game makes this game really, really unique. You have already said it, but it is that negotiation phase, basically. And, a lot of the board games we play have that as part of it, but not quite to this degree. Like when I played it, we went away into separate planning rooms so that no one could hear what we were talking about. And I would say that what was meant as quite light-hearted fun soon, very quickly became, teetering on real life sort of irritations. It's a very involved game.
I think the issue is that you trust your friends. Your friendships are built on trust and honesty and hopefully a number of other positive things. And that's why when your friendship turns out not to be as trustworthy and as intact as you would want it to be, and your friends do things that generally set you back and irritate you hugely, you feel quite betrayed.
I actually have a good story about exactly that. So I suppose Simon is who I should be addressing this to, seeing as he is judging this, and I've already been stolen half a point, despite the fact that, when we went out, right, I should get the whole point. I have this one anecdote which I think really accurately outlines exactly what diplomacy does to a human being and why I think you are most likely to lose friends over it. It starts actually way back when I was starting first to get into board games. I'm sure most people who listen to this podcast, I know certainly all of us, have had that moment where you realise that actually games get more interesting than Monopoly. And I was sort of just going through that transition phase. It was a very exciting time in my life. And it's actually it's hard to believe, before I knew two members of this podcast. So it's actually quite a far time ago. I'd been invited to play a game of diplomacy by a very good friend with his friends, who at the time I knew very little about. So it was sort of an opportunity to meet some new people, some people who are into the same hobby as I was. Now, before a game of diplomacy, I was soon to learn there is very little to discuss. This is because everyone in the room is quietly preparing themselves to be outrageously irritated by the actions of everyone else in that room, which doesn't lead to a tremendously cohesive environment with which to meet new people. I was a little nervous. No one was really talking. Sort of just cold, hard, steely preparation. And I needed to learn how to play the game. At this point, I didn't actually know the rules at all. So the friend who invited me suggested that I pick it up as I went, which I'm guessing at this point for him...
That's brutal.
Exactly. I think the game may have already begun, because I definitely wouldn't have done, and I think he was just probably trying to write off a potential rival at this point. So the one person who stood up to the plate was a chap called Merv. He took me aside and he explained the rules to me slowly. He answered all of my questions. He individually introduced me to everyone in the room. He got a conversation going. He helped me set up my board, my part of the board, and was what I can only describe as a thoroughly decent chap. He really extended that hand of friendship. Now, for those of you who don't know diplomacy, as we've already discussed, that key mechanic to it is that negotiation phase. And during that, what we were doing was taking players with whom you want to collaborate out of earshot of the other players to discuss tactics, and the idea being that you can coordinate attacks, which is the only real way of making any progress. If you attack alone, you're not going to get very far. It was around about the third negotiation phase of this game when I had my first player who wanted to strategize with me. Now, considering I was very new to this game, I was pretty useless at it, this was a really good moment for me. I was quite excited. I was in a strategic enough position that someone else thought I was worth utilising. So I was feeling pretty good about myself. We went aside, and he explained his plan in detail to completely and utterly end Merv's game. He could do it in a single move. It was so simple. And what the hell do I do? Merv had been the only person who'd reached out to me when I was nervous. He was the only person who took the time to explain the rules to me, to introduce me properly to the group. He was someone who, even in this moment, I was actually rather hoping might become a friend. And it took me approximately 45 milliseconds to decide to agree completely to the plan and to really ruin Merv's game. And then within the next turn, a game which I told would take an entire evening to finish was over in 40 minutes. Merv's nation lay in utter tatters as my armies marched victoriously through his territory. I looked over to him as I didn't win the game, but as I kind of absolutely ruined his game. And I saw the hurt in his eyes, the mistrust, the betrayal, and it felt wonderful. And that is why I think it's the most likely game to lose friends over. Because actually, do you know what? I am still friends with Merv to this day, but I'm not entirely sure why.
Brilliant.
Oh, that's a nice ending to the story. I thought you were going to say, and we never spoke again.
Yeah.
Pass on the street.
No, he's too much of a nice chap.
Oh, God. That is absolute manna from heaven, that story.
Yeah.
I'd like to build on this because I think that virtual diplomacy is the worst. And because of that, it's that much more involved. People are talking to their friends and they've got days to strategize. Not usually multiple days, like a single day. And they are... worst of all is when they've got allies within the household that they're living in. So you've got partners, people in relationships. Imagine forming an alliance with about a half, much like real life, really. But then throughout it all, you know that one of you will have to betray the other in order to win. Really, unlike real life, one would hope. And that kind of tension is quite unsettling within the household. Bit awkward for that person that you're placing all your faith in. And also when friends do favours for each other. Imagine doing something like, I don't know, walking someone's dog to seal the deal about invading France, only to find that they invade you instead and you've walked their dog for nothing.
Oh, yeah, that dog's not coming home, is it?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I do think that if you're going to try diplomacy online, I think the kind of de facto way of doing it is a web-based version of it, which is aptly named Backstabber.
That says it all.
That does really tell you all you need to know about diplomacy.
Yeah.
Well, of course, it spawned Subterfuge, didn't it? I mean, Subterfuge is based loosely on it.
Yes, yeah. I think so. Subterfuge being a game that took very many ideas of diplomacy and evolved and adapted them in a way that the designers saw fit.
Let's not go down this rabbit hole though, because otherwise we're going to end up.
No. What I was going to say is that I do have quite a soft spot for diplomacy, even though I've never played it. And I think it kind of tallies up with the story that you told, Rob, in that I remember a long time ago there was an episode of a mildly more successful podcast of this called This American Life. Where they...
No, I never heard of it.
No, it's
tiny.
a small niche thing. Where they interviewed someone that went to the diplomacy championships, and this is an event that happens every year, and it's in some state in America somewhere, and it's like a worldwide championship of people that get together and play diplomacy over a weekend, and there's like a grand tournament type thing, and listening to that episode was probably one of the first times that I realised that, like Rob said, there are board games other than Monopoly and Cluedo and that sort of thing. So very, very good choice. Do you have any closing statements before I pass the ball to Sam?
Yeah, Sam's wrong in every way. That's how I'd like to end.
I have the perfect closing statement, which is actually a quote. Because I put this question out online, what board game is most likely to lose you friends? And a guy called Justin wrote back to say, it's diplomacy. And no game is complete until someone throws a chair or a punch. The perfect sign-off for that case.
I feel like I want that framed on, just that quote framed in a...
They should put that on the box. Yeah, that's...
Yeah, they should, yeah.
Okay, Sam, that was a strong case.
How are you following that?
Your rebuttal?
Okay, so It's interesting actually because the game I picked is nothing like it couldn't be any further from diplomacy really. Even more interestingly, probably the few games that I passed up to get there. So I decided not to pick FIFA, the computer game FIFA, the football simulation game FIFA, which is the game that I've seen produce the angriest response in a single person. I also decided not to pick Eclipse, which is the game which has made me most displeased with a friend of mine. The game I am actually going to champion for this is Articulate. As it's the game that I've seen most consistently make people annoyed with their competitors and, crucially, with their own teammates. So, Articulate is, as the advert describes, a fast-talking description game where players take it in turns to describe places, people, things, or verbs to their teammate. And if they get one correct, they move on to the next word until 60 seconds is up, and then it goes on to the next team. And they keep doing this until they've completed 2 laps of the game board, and then one pair will win. So, this game has produced some of the most amazing moments I've witnessed in any games I've played, including the description of the Battle of Little Bighorn as the fight with the mini trumpet, because apparently Custer's last stand wouldn't have cut it. I've also heard the panic shouts of someone describing the Eiffel Tower as a big French candlestick, and the confident shouts of someone describing the word crushing as what Liverpool did to Wolves on Saturday to someone who knew so little about football they genuinely thought Liverpudlians were pressing Wolves into some sort of disgusting cider. It's amazing fun, but truly makes you want to sell your friends to an invading alien race for experimentation. And it does this in 3 ways, which I shall explain now. The first way, the smug-faced friend. This is a friend who isn't involved in the current game and is just observing while another team tries to guess their way to victory. This friend sits there waiting for the playing team member to start to struggle with a clue or get one wrong, and then they will sigh, or they will tut, or they will simply pull a face that by the end of the game you're willing to rid him of with a potato peeler, as he sits there and claims that he knew that answer, or that he'd have had a much better clue for that. That's the first way. Awful. The second way, the perfect couple friends. Sickening, these two. A lovely couple, so in sync that they come out with clues which make no rational sense to anyone else in the room apart from their partner. And when asked afterwards how on earth they managed to get the answer Pope Benedict III from the clue poppadoms, will come out with some hideously soppy story about a trip they once took to Rome and the curry house they went to, which was the best in Italy, or something horrible like that. Your mouth goes, oh, what a lovely story. Or your brain goes, stop talking. Stop talking. And then the third way. The moment you realise your playing partner is thicker than a railway sleeper. It's the worst one, this, and the main reason why this game is so worthy of a point in this competition. It actually makes you hate your own team. And it's a burning rage. It starts with the first moronic response to an obvious clue like the capital of France and being given the response Madrid, and normally ends with an explosion of rage after the 7th futile guess to answer the clue, the round things on your car, and after gears, sprockets, mirrors, chairs, paint and sunroof, the timer finally goes dead and you can't stop yourself yelling the word wheel at a volume that NASA scientists still think was an alien communication. Now I should state, I love Articulate. I really enjoy it. And it is amazing fun, but it is truly peerless in making you dislike, distrust, and genuinely never want to speak to your friends again. It takes a long time to decompress from a properly competitive game Articulate. I love it to bits, but God, it makes you think funny things about your friends.
Give the point to Sam, I think. Yeah, it's good.
I have I do have an amazing soft spot for Articulate, and the part of it that really spoke to me in your passionate defence of Articulate was the perfect couple, because it was my other half that introduced me to Articulate, and I can absolutely identify with that. I've definitely won some games where I've just pulled something completely unintelligible to the average person that she was able to understand and get. I especially like it because I think there is, at least at some point in Articulate, around where other teams can guess what you're trying to guess and therefore knock you back. I want to say it's like if you to score your last point, it's like a free-for-all and your team has to get it first.
It depends a little bit on the type of Articulate you're playing, because there's a couple of different versions, because some of them it's based on a spinning wheel, which obviously that gives you the topics, but there's an extra wheel within a wheel that that sets up different things. But
Yes.
yes, that is a feature.
Yes, that's the one. That's the one I have. Yeah, and I've had one particularly memorable time where I wasn't playing with my other half, but I was playing with someone that that I knew very well and that is into the same things as me, and so we could use that to our advantage. And I think the clue was, it was like a nature clue, and I believe the answer was horse. But the way in which he described it was something along the lines of, in the third Assassin's Creed game, you were able to take this thing into the city for the first time. To which the whole table blanched, and I went, "Oh yeah, horse." I've got to give it to Sam, just based on that happy
Stay
memory
your
alone.
hand. I have a wild card.
Oh,
The game.
is this your play for the full point?
Yeah.
Oh, I feel so
Go on,
betrayed.
then.
The game in which you are most likely to lose a friend is Russian roulette. I don't feel an explanation is needed.
You're not wrong.
I almost want to give you half a point for effort, Claire.
Oh, thank you.
But I'm not going to. Court rules in favour of Sam. 1 point for Sam.
Well, thank you very much, Simon. I will savour that point.
That's the last time we let Simon judge.
Okay, so with that in mind, it's probably time that we moved on to what's been keeping Simon up at night. Maybe up in other areas, but we better not discuss that. It is the start of our Twilight Imperium special, so I think it's only right, given how much he loves this game, that we ask Rob to describe what Twilight Imperium is. Now, go on, Simon. What's TI? Tell us about it.
So, Twilight Imperium is a game of galactic conquest in which 3 to 6 players take on the role of one of 17 different factions vying for galactic domination. And to achieve this objective, you have to use a combination of military might, political manoeuvring, and economic bargaining. I'm a big fan of the game, as I think you could probably tell if you've listened to the podcast or ever really had a conversation with me about board games. And I think the way that it combines those kind of 3 things that I mentioned, the sort of military part, the political part, and the kind of trading and bargaining part, are pretty much unlike anything I've really played. I think other games attempt different parts of them in different ways, but I think the way that they're all married together in Twilight Imperium is really exciting. I'm actually really intrigued to see what you guys think. I know this is kind of our big TI episode. As people that don't own the game and as people that haven't played it quite as much as I have, I'm really interested to hear kind of what your opinions are on it as a whole and on playing the sort of couple of games that we've played in the last few weeks.
I've got to say that before we played it, I was so intimidated by its size that I just kept putting it off.
I'm especially interested to hear about that because I know that we obviously spoke about it a lot, and that was kind of the overarching impression I got from you, Claire, was that you were a little bit nervous that this game was going to be too big and too complicated because of its reputation. And I think it's fair to say that its reputation is that I would describe it as an event game, in that it's not something you're going to play on a Thursday evening with a couple of your mates. It's something that you agree with as many people as you can get interested and involved ahead of time. You know, you say, look, guys, really, you need to get there, get to my house at 10 a.m. on a Saturday and don't have any plans in the evening. Certainly that's how I sell it to people.
How many people take you up on that?
Well, there's 3 of them here, and I'm working on more.
I don't know, actually. I think it's probably fair to say that as of the 4 of us, I'm probably the one who likes the game the least. And that isn't to say that I dislike the game. I do like it. I think it is absolutely decadent. You've got so much to do in this game. So many different play styles, so many different races that you can play, so many different ways of winning. I do like it, but I think there are a lot of reasons to be apprehensive about playing, I suppose. First thing I'd say is if you are going to play, make sure you play with someone who already knows the rules. Or if you're not playing with someone who already knows the rules, make sure you watch at least 4 million hours of tutorials, because otherwise you're not going to get your head around it. It's going to be a really hard time. I guess just leading on from what Claire was saying, about the size being intimidating. I actually think it does a good job of taking a huge amount of content and cramming it into very understandable and structured gameplay. My reservation with it is that you end up with so many cards to keep track of, so many game-altering abilities, that it is utterly impossible to keep track of it. Now, you might say that's down to the player to keep on top of all of that, and actually, that's just bad play. You should keep more track of all that. My argument is that we have computers to do that for us. If you take, for example, Stellaris, which is to all intents and purposes TI but computer based, the computer can handle all of the game altering effects. It can handle all of your economy. All you do is just have fun. Everything else is taken care for you. Whereas in TI, I'm constantly playing that game, going through it, being like, balls, like 3 turns ago I could have played this and totally changed the game, but now it's completely useless to me because I forgot I had it, or it had been tucked underneath the board in a way that I couldn't see it, or it had fallen off the table and gotten caught underneath a chair.
I would like to point out that if you have an appropriately sized table, this issue is very much minimised.
Ooh.
Yeah, I have played that in a few places, Rob, where that hasn't happened.
So,
I make that as a jest, Rob, because I do agree that yes, there is a lot to keep track of, but when
we play at Rob's house, we do have to spread it over 2 tables and the dresser.
Yeah, and that will invariably lead to missing on certain potentially important text or action cards. But I completely agree with your first point that if you are thinking of purchasing this game, you have to be prepared as the owner of the game to also be the referee. And I will let the others say whether they think I do this well or not, but I do always try to remind people to try and avoid the situation that Rob's kind of getting at. Try and remind people of certain things that, okay, remember you have this technology, or remember that this is the way that this part of the rules works, or this system works, in an effort to make sure that if I win, it's not because I know the rules better than everyone else around the table, because I think that would be a fairly shallow victory, and 2, that
hasn't
someone
stopped you before.
I actually think Simon's quite good at that. Coaching people, but backstabbing them at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a hard line to tread.
Claire, going back to just your kind of initial trepidations, I think, how do you feel about it now versus... So you've played 2 games now?
I have now played 2 games.
And how do you feel about it now in comparison to how you thought it was going to be, or how you thought based on your impressions, the game was going to be?
Yeah, it is actually totally different. So someone had given me a review of the game, and they'd said that they were feeling tense for the whole thing, and their game had lasted 6 hours, which I actually now know is quite a short game. But anyway, I thought, well, I don't want to be locked into a game where I'm not relaxed and happy and I have to endure it for 6 hours. So I was really quite nervous, and I put it off for quite a while. But actually, I enjoyed it as much as I enjoy any other board game, but it went on for a lot longer. So I think it depends a lot on who you are and what kind of board games you enjoy. I thought it was great, and I'd recommend it to anyone. And actually, the length of the game is not that off-putting. The time absolutely flies, and it's almost inconvenient because you lose your Saturday. It's over in a flash.
It is incredible. I don't think I've ever played a game where you look at your clock and you're like, oh yeah, it's middle of the afternoon, and then you carry on playing the game, and honestly, it's like 8 o'clock.
Suddenly, it's dark.
Yeah, and you're engaged, and that can be tiring because obviously there's a lot of concentration going on, and there's a lot of thinking and manoeuvring and politicking and bargaining that happens in every round of the game. But I think that is, time flies when you're having fun. And it doesn't fly any faster for me than playing Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. It's interesting, in no other medium of media or games or anything, is there something that makes you lose track of time in quite the same way as TI? you watch a good film or something like that, you might find you lose a couple of hours or something like that. When you finish the end of the film, you sort of feel, well, maybe that went quicker than I thought. But you look at your watch, 2 hours has gone by, and you think, oh, I suppose that's about right. TI doesn't do that. You look down at your watch 1 minute, 2 rounds go by, and instantly 6 hours has passed, and you just haven't noticed, which is a big credit to it, to be honest.
And Sam, I'd be interested to hear, because I know you were always quite intrigued by it when I kind of spoke to you about it before you'd played it. How did your impressions change across, pre-playing it and now having a few games under your belt and feeling, I assume, feeling quite a lot more comfortable with the rules and the general, rhythm of play?
Yeah, to be honest, I wouldn't say that my first impression of the game was too wrong. I sort of expected this game to be a bit like Eclipse in its sort of galactic conquest theme, but with a lot more flavour to it, so to speak, a lot more nous required to really excel at it. And I think that's probably not a bad way of describing it in a very sort of broad term. I wouldn't say that my views on the game have changed massively the more I've played it. I would say that my enjoyment has the more I've got hold of the rules. I think Eclipse is a game you can pick up quite a lot quicker than TI, and you get to grips with the rules a bit quicker, but I think it gives you less enjoyment, for example. Comparing the two is a little bit like an oven pizza and a beef Wellington. You can put some time into cooking an oven pizza and you'll get something quite quickly, which is quite nice. Or you can spend a few hours cooking a beef Wellington, and you'll be waiting a long time to get it right. But when you do, it's excellent.
I'd agree with that. Actually, I think that you enjoy the game more each time you play it, because you understand the rules better. Basically, you can start to formulate strategies in your head before you make moves, rather than the first time you play you're just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff, because you don't really understand how you win the game, and particularly don't understand the races as well. The races have a massive impact on how you play the game. So you get some which are really angled towards warfare, you get others that are angled towards research, and I will admit, I think an excellent thing with this game, and again I think which trumps Eclipse, is that there is no one way to win the game, as it were. Like, yes, having a strong military fleet, you get a lot of combat, you do go to war with your mates, but actually the actual advantage of doing that, you would only ever want to do it to get for a strategic purpose. And then once you've actually got that sort of strategic purpose, you'd probably retreat and leave the system back to whoever owned it in the first place anyway, because you've scored your victory point. That's all done. You can give the territory back.
You don't want to be overreaching either, because there's always, through stretching in one direction, you leave yourself, potentially open in another front.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. And also, as well, I think something it does quite well is you don't necessarily hold animosity against your mates quite as much as I think you would do in other strategy games. So if someone invades me in Eclipse, I make it my entire game just to ruin their game. I get very, very annoyed. Whereas in TI, someone invades me, I get immediately very, very annoyed, and then they score the victory point at the end of the turn, and I go, get it. Okay, I understand why you did that. And actually, if you can justify it, it actually means that I'm less likely then just to sort of angle my entire game towards ruining someone else's, and actually see the strategic value of that.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out that the way that you win is that there's a set of objectives that are available to everyone, and in fulfilling those objectives you score victory points. And in the standard setup of the game, it's the first race to 10 victory points. And then there are, you can pull additional secret objectives that are obviously personal to you, and that, depending on what they are, might encourage you to do things that strike outside of just staying within your kind of area of control, or might put you down a particular research path with the technology and things like that. And the same for the public objectives. And then the center of the board, and the board is made up of these kind of very satisfying, is it hexagons? I think they're hexagons, aren't they? Yeah. And at the center of the board is Mechatol Rex, which is the kind of galactic capital, or the Coruscant, or if you like, of the galaxy. And
is that in Lord of the Rings? This is where the elves live, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's what Sam tried to build in Minecraft.
That's right, yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Philistines.
But at the centre of the board is Mechatol Rex, and just through controlling the board you can open up other opportunities for scoring. And so that makes that center of that board very valuable, and it means that there's always either somebody's reinforcing it, or someone's trying to dig someone up from it, or someone's been holding it for the vast majority of the game and really built up a big lead, and that then invokes the rest of the table to sort of sit down with each other and say, we really need to do something about this, because otherwise, Sam is going to run away with the game.
That is really interesting you say that, because I can happily say that I have never attempted to take Mechatol Rex as part of my game strategy, because it works so beautifully as everyone just weakening their defences, weakening their armies, weakening their navies, as they just pile troops onto Mechatol Rex. And inevitably, as soon as someone gets it, just to sort of explain a very brief mechanic in the game, if you hold Mechatol Rex, you can choose a particular card. What's it called? Imperialism?
Yeah, it's the Imperial strategy card.
Strategy card. And if you take that, basically, then you immediately score a point at the end of the round, provided you hold Mechatol Rex at the end of the round.
Not even at the end of the round. It's just if you hold it and you activate that strategy card, as soon as you play it, that's a point, which is 10% of the game that you're playing.
It is. I agree.
So you
with
can
you.
see the value.
I've only ever seen someone score maybe 2 points from it before they're knocked off it. And as soon as someone gets Mechatol Rex, basically, every single player around that board then decides, right, okay, we need to get that Imperial strategy card, because we need to deny the person who owns Mechatol Rex. And basically, just as soon as you own that, you make yourself such a target that I don't think it's worth taking.
Well, I completely agree that there's very many viable strategies that you could take that do not involve it. One of the things I think Rob brought up back at the beginning was around learning the rules, and I think Sam as well said that his enjoyment of the game kind of grew with his understanding of the rules. As I'm kind of the person that knows the rules the best, having owned the game and having done a lot of the research to make sure that I can bring someone in that's never played it before and they still understand what they're doing, I'd be interested to hear kind of how you felt about learning the rules, how you feel the systems in the game, whether you think they're straightforward, complicated, overwhelming. I think it'd be interesting to start with Claire, because I think you've played the least out of all of us, just about, Claire, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, the caveat for me saying anything about rules is that every time I play a board game, it's a bit of trial and error as I find my feet. And I'm terrible at paying attention when people explain rules. So games with long and complicated rules, I tend to start a little ill-prepared compared to people with longer attention spans. I actually was pleasantly surprised with TI. I thought there would be rules that would bore us to death and go on forever and make the game too complex, because before I played, I couldn't really imagine how else it would manage to last so long. But actually, it feels a lot like a slightly shorter board game, but it just goes on for longer.
It's good to know that you think, considering the reputation of the game, that actually learning the rules and the way that they're structured is, I think, pretty elegant.
Yeah.
Can I just bring up 2 hours to explain the rules, Simon? 2 hours, dear boy.
Oh yes, there was that.
We had a brand new player. And it was two
brand new
hours. 2 brand new players. 2 hours before we started the game.
Yeah, but to be fair, Rob, when you've got to hike to different parts of the house to get to various bits of the game board, it will take a while.
Didn't we stop and eat pizza in that time as well?
There might have been pizza.
Yeah, it was on the way to the strategy card board, halfway up the stairs. We were forced to open a pizza restaurant halfway around Rob's house just for some sustenance as you hike around trying to find your bits of the board game. Okay, I think it's probably time we gave these poor listeners a break from Simon's loving ramblings about TI and potentially asked him to inform us if there's been any game-based news over the last couple of weeks. Simon?
That's a big question. I mean, there has been a lot of news. I have curated what I think are probably the 3 or 4 biggest announcements that have come out in the past couple of weeks. So first things first, for anyone that's interested in sort of video games, both Sony and Microsoft have announced their next-gen consoles. So that's happened since we last recorded. Xbox, it was very interesting actually, because I think both of them were playing this kind of game of chicken in which neither of them had revealed their price or launch date, and neither of them seemed very interested in going first and doing that. And I think that was definitely an element of sort of corporate one-upsmanship around the pricing of these consoles. I'll be interested actually to get Sam and Rob and Claire's opinion on this, because I know at least both Sam and Rob never got a PS4 or an Xbox One or anything from this generation. So I wonder whether you'll be interested in getting something from this next generation, or whether you think that PC is probably enough and will keep you happy.
I mean, my answer is probably predicated really on what Rob's is, and a few other people, in the without any of my friends going up to upgrade to a next-gen console, I don't really see a huge amount of point in me doing it. I'm not really one that sits down and plays solo games very often. When I do, they tend to be PC-based. So on the whole, I think it's more a wait and see for me on that one. Have you got an idea of price, Simon?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. I think let me give you the Cliff Notes pitch for both of them, and I'll be interested to see what you think. So Xbox was unfortunate in that some of the retail sort of promotional material leaked, and so that kind of forced their hand. But I think they went about it in quite they did it in quite a good way. They weren't sort of angry and threw their toys out the pram. I think they sort of styled it out quite well. They announced two consoles, which was quite interesting. One of them, so they're both called the Xbox Series, and then you have the Xbox Series X, which is your full-blooded, next-gen, extremely powerful console. And then you have the Xbox Series S, which is a much cheaper console, runs digitally, but is also slightly less powerful. It is only like a very small step up from their most powerful current-gen console. So the Series X, which is the expensive one, the sort of flagship one, was announced for $499, which I think equates to in pounds, if you're English, I think it's £449. £450.
Oh, it's not half as bad as I was expecting.
Yeah,
to be honest, I thought it'd be worse than that.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's interesting though, because then the Series S, the budget version, is coming out at $299. So I think that's £249. So £250 for
that does seem reasonable value for a games console.
I mean it's definitely an aggressive price point to try and entice people that maybe like yourselves had missed the last gen or the current gen and were interested in getting on board with something without spending £400+. The thing that really caught my eye with these announcements though is that you can of course try and get a pre-order for these and just pay up front those amounts. They also unveiled something which is called Xbox All Access. And essentially what this is a very, very generous finance deal for owning one of these consoles. So you can sign up for this thing, and it's in the US, but I think there is equivalent pricing in the UK as well. And if you want to get the more powerful console, you pay over 24 months, $34.99 a month. That gets you the $500 console, but it also gets you access to their Game Pass Ultimate, which is like a Netflix-style subscription, which gives you access to about 100 Xbox games, including day and date releases of all of the Microsoft first parties. So if when they release the next Halo game, instead of paying £40-50 for it, you would just get access to it straight away with this Game Pass. It also gives you access to their newly launched Project xCloud, which is essentially a game streaming service in which you stream games from Microsoft servers onto your phone, and you can play, using a Bluetooth Xbox controller. But you can also stream them to your computer, to a tablet, to your phone, like that. And it also gives you access to the Xbox Live Gold multiplayer, which is the paid online multiplayer membership that you need. And if you actually do all of the calculations for that, it ends up being basically interest-free for what I think is a fairly compelling, offering of console plus lots of games to play. I don't know what you guys kind of think about that as a proposition.
I was absolutely raised a PlayStation man. I've only ever owned PlayStations. However, that sounds very enticing indeed. I'm astonished by the price of the console. I think that seems very, very cheap in itself. But also the idea of paying a monthly fee and getting access to all of that. I mean, that's the way everything's going, isn't it? No one buys a car outright anymore. They buy it in monthly fees, and it seems like that is the way things are going in general, and you get access to all of that. That sounds like a very good deal indeed.
And just to top that off, if we're sticking with the Microsoft news, there was kind of late last week the announcement, and they did this very cleverly. They coincided this with the launch of the pre-orders for these new consoles. It was announced that Microsoft are buying Bethesda Game Studio. Now, I don't know if that means anything to you guys, but essentially what that means now is that Microsoft own the Elder Scrolls franchise, they own Fallout, they own Doom, they own Dishonored, and all of the other intellectual property and franchises that Bethesda were known for working on now actually fall under Microsoft as a first party, which opens up the idea that some of these future titles, such as the follow-up to Skyrim, might end up being Xbox exclusives.
I thought Skyrim was just getting re-released. The same game was getting re-released over and over and over again.
I definitely wouldn't write off the fact that we see Skyrim on PS5 and an Xbox Series X. But I mean that's quite a coup in terms of acquisitions. So I'll throw you Sony's pitch for the PS5 just as a counterbalance to that and see what you think. The PS5 was announced I think it was like a week or so after the Xbox information came out. The standard PS5 will be the exact same price as the Xbox Series X, so the more expensive version, so $499 US, $449 UK. But they also announced a second console, which is interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a games console generation where you've already got two choices of console to go from. And the second choice that the PS5 or that Sony are offering is a digital-only edition. So it's essentially exactly the same as the standard PS5, but it doesn't come with a Blu-ray drive. And that's priced at $400. So I guess that'll be £350, $349.99. And that is due to release, I think it's the first week of November. I think they both come out. Xbox comes out November 10th. PlayStation comes out November 12th in the US, Canada, Japan, and 19th in the UK.
Okay, thank you for that, Simon. And because of your excellent work with news readings, I will now steer us back onto the topic of Twilight Imperium. I know that makes you happy. Okay, so what I'm going to do for our sort of closing comments on Twilight Imperium is ask us to offer up our favourite anecdote from a game of Twilight Imperium. And I think I will start with Rob.
My real fear is that it's going to be everyone's favourite anecdote because it was so beautiful. But we've been playing a 10-round game. Basically, myself, Simon and Sam had all placed ourselves on the same side of the board, which is already a bad idea because we have so much animosity, so much previous history about playing board games together that basically we spend the entire game trying to ruin each other's game. Now, the fact that I won this game is neither here nor there. Actually, it's not really all that important to the story. I just thought I'd drop it in there. But what did happen is right towards the end of the game, when it became apparent to Sam that he couldn't win, he was out of this game, he just decided he was going to march everything that he had and drop it right on Simon's home system. And it was a beautiful moment. It's, fleet after fleet after fleet sort of piled into this home system. He didn't even bring any troops. Like, he couldn't even take the home system. His only intention was to ruin Simon's day. And I think thoroughly achieved it, and also as well paved the way for my victory. I don't know if I'd mentioned that. It's probably not all that important, but I won, so there we are.
I think you should have tried to take Rob out, really. I mean, he did win.
Yeah, did I mention that? I won, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, someone was always going to win, and it might have ended up being Rob. Whatever I did, it might not have done. It certainly wasn't going to be me. I don't think at that point it was likely to be Simon either,
Yeah,
if I can remember
I had no part
correctly.
of the victory.
But the thing that people seem to have forgotten in all of this is that I don't think there is a greater joy in board gaming than being able to wipe somebody off their own game board, which was entirely what I decided to do here. I knew I was out of it, and I just thought there might be this one opportunity to salvage some glory from my from the jaws of defeat. So I went for it, and to be honest, I didn't quite manage it, but I think I did just enough damage to completely scupper his game at least.
For all intents and purposes, I think I was pretty much wiped off the board.
And you took it so well, it amazed me.
Yeah, you did take it well. I agree with that. Claire, you've only had 2 games, I think it is now. Have you got a favourite anecdote? Is this an ambitious question?
Maybe not an anecdote, but I do have a favourite TI moment, which is the last round of the last game that we played, where Simon and Sam were drawn first and they had a long lead over the other players on the board. And in the last round, Sam attacked Simon so that Simon couldn't score any points. I attacked Simon in order to get to Sam so that Sam couldn't take the points for attacking Simon. And the two losers who had been lagging for that game ended up at the front, and Sam and Simon ended up in last place. That was great.
Yeah, that was one of my favourite TI games as well. I enjoyed that one an awful lot. I had a real bittersweet moment with that. I have consistently, since I've been playing TI, always played as the same race, and it's one that I've sort of struggled to get to grips with, really. The best way to play as this race really goes against my normal playing style, and it's taken me quite a long time to get to grips with them. And playing in that game at the start, I just nailed it. I just worked out exactly how I needed to play with them. And I think by the time we got to 10 victory points, I was 5, maybe even 6 points clear of everybody else. Which begged the question on this first 14-point game we've ever played, which idiot decided to suggest that it would be a good idea to play a 14-point game as opposed to a 10-point game. Turns out after examination that idiot was me. Hence the very bittersweet nature of that game. But I still enjoyed it very much. I think we would probably be remiss to finish talking about TI without mentioning some of our reservations or potentially some of our least favourite parts of the game. So, I mean, I will start with this, with a reservation that I think a lot of people hold with this game, which is the price of it. And I think I can probably understand that. It is a very expensive game.
You do get a lot.
You do get a lot, I agree. But is it worth, say, 3 premium board games? I mean, sorry, to give people some context, when this game came out, it has dropped a little bit in price now, but when it came out at full price, it was about the cost of 3 premium board games. So the question is, do we think it's worth owning instead of 3 other premium board games?
I would say no. I think I'd probably take the 3 board games. Just the other thing to add would be that whilst the game is already pretty expensive to buy it outright, I know in order to make it manageable, in order to make it easily and relatively quickly deployable and pack upable, you needed to invest a fair amount of money in like tidies and things to keep stuff in so it's not just left loosely in the box. And there are whole threads on Reddit of people discussing how they make the game manageable. I kind of feel like that should come with the game.
Yeah, I mean, even to this day, and TI's been out quite a while now, and sorry, to give people further context on this, which I should have really given earlier, the current price of TI is on or around £95 to £100, depending on where you buy it from. It's in that sort of region. And even today, when it's been out for multiple years, you can still buy organisers in excess of £60 worth just to go inside your cardboard box to hold your other bits of cardboard and plastic, which is £160 to have a game which is organised.
I would argue that they do provide an insert with the game that is adequate. And I use that word. I don't think it's a bad insert. I don't think it's a good insert. It will adequately hold the pieces of the game so long as you've got enough little, the one thing I would expect they should include is some little plastic baggies or something to kind of hold all of the little tokens.
I suppose the last thing to mention on cost is that they had just released an expansion to Twilight Imperium, and I know from what you've heard so far, listeners, you're fairly convinced it doesn't need one, but there you go, they've released it anyway.
How much will it cost?
Which will cost you a further £100, there or thereabouts, on top of your £100 game and your £60 of organisers, which, as Simon points out, are optional. Just to add my closing statements on TI, because I know I've sort of knocked it a little bit for its price. As someone that has quite a sizable board game collection these days from doing this podcast and a sort of mild board game buying addiction I seem to have, I've sort of reasonably well exposed to quite a lot of different games. My board game collection includes big expensive games such as Gloomhaven, which is Board Game Geek's current number 1 best game in their top 100 list.
And comes in a bigger box.
Yes, it also does come in a very big box and is jolly expensive. But I am fairly convinced that Twilight Imperium is, and I choose this word carefully, the best board game that I've ever
Oh my
played. I think it's
goodness,
the best
that's a
put
big
together.
shout.
I think the mechanics tie together better in this than any other game that I've played, and I think I get more enjoyment out of playing it than any other game that I've played. Okay, that brings us to the end of our review of Twilight Imperium and the end of our Twilight Imperium special, which means that Simon can finally take that cushion off his lap and calm down. But just before we go, we're going to ask Claire if anything has jumped into our mailbox in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I have a question this week from Gemma in Surrey. She's got 2 children, one aged 2, the other aged 5, and she wants to know what games she can play with her children. But I'm going to adapt that question, as I don't think that any of us are qualified to give her a decent answer. And instead, I'm going to ask you what the first grown-up board games you can play with a child is, in your opinion. And when I say that, I mean I want it to be a good game that you would actually enjoy playing with a child.
I don't think that Twilight Imperium is a good game to play with your kids.
No, I don't think I'd recommend TI either. I think that's a very astute observation there, Rob. A couple of bits I could add to this, though. I recently received a game called Villainous, which Rob and his far better half Megan were kind enough to buy me for my birthday, which is a Disney game, actually, where you play as the villains from various Disney films, including Robin Hood or Aladdin and a collection of others. And you have various sort of devious objectives that you have to complete in order to win the game. And there's just enough sort of complexity in it for someone who liked board games to enjoy it. And also it's thematic enough that kids who are into the sort of Disney theme will really buy into the game and probably enjoy playing it. One caveat I would put with it is that if you are someone that plays a lot of board games who goes to play this game against someone who doesn't but just likes Disney, you are going to win quite convincingly every time. So there would certainly have to be an element of sort of parenting or sort of subtle help or deliberate bad moves on the part of the elder player playing this game. That would be my sort of more modern suggestion. Of the others, I would suggest that people really shouldn't forget about old classics when they're trying to find games to play with kids. Mousetrap, for example, is an excellent game. It's a good laugh. Doesn't really matter how old you are. And never ever forget about Hungry Hungry Hippos. That is hilarious whether you're 25, 35, 5 or 85. Sitting there hitting the hippo's tail trying to eat all the little red balls will never stop being fun.
I agree with you. I'm going to continue on that line, Sam, as well. I think Uno is an absolute killer of a game.
Yeah, very good
Great
suggestion.
fun.
I like Uno a lot. Great game.
Yeah, I played a lot of good games of Uno as a kid. Now, again, I think the best kids games are the ones which are interesting to adults as well. It's like the best kids movies and the best kids films. They're the ones which have got like really subtle, sly adult humour, which adults can laugh at, but kids don't get.
If there are any parents with small children trying to take this advice, then Hungry Hippos is for children aged 2 and up. Uno Junior is for children aged 5 and up, with the standard recommended for 7. And Villainous is recommended for children aged 10 and older. I've actually also looked into this a bit, and it seems that a lot of good board games that are designed with adults in mind start and advertise themselves for age 10 and up. So as a child, I loved a game called Survive, which you can play as a family, and I would still play with adult friends. So in this scenario, you're trying to get off an island that's gradually sinking into the sea, and you've got to get in boats or swim, however your little tokens can get to the safety of the shore, but your friends are trying to eat you with their whales, sea monsters and sharks, which is great fun, recommended for 10 and up. What I would say is that some children surprise you and some children have particular aptitude, and although the box says 10 and up, they'll be able to deal with it much younger. So yesterday I heard about a child whose parents said that their maths really took off at the age of 4 when they discovered Splendor, which is a game that we kind of wrote off a few weeks ago as not really matching up to our expectations, but as a family board game I think it has great potential, and I'd be really impressed with a 4-year-old. It's simple addition, they don't need to add beyond 15, but it's really nice to know that children can develop and grow through that. Likewise, things like chess is stringing a lot of simple concepts together, And knowing that we were going to have to answer this question, I asked my father about this because he loves chess and taught his children it. And he said that at the age of 6, we were playing full games. So it's not too young to try things.
Thank you very much for listening to another episode of Tiny Table Talks. If you like what you've heard, please consider hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a future show. Next week, normal service will be resumed with 2 game reviews, historical board games about Vikings, and an online deduction game. We hope to see you there.